If at 4:04 in the morning a shop bell rang in a place that never opens early, and someone offered to wind a stopped clock so you could revisit a conversation for exactly 7 minutes, would you accept knowing nothing that was said could be erased, only properly heard? Helena said yes before she even understood what it was. She was 58, hands that could make coffee with her eyes closed, and an old silence living in her throat. Every night after her hospital shift she walked down New Street, and every night the window of the House of Stopped Clocks was dark, like a theater between shows. But on that Tuesday the window breathed a soft yellow light, like a home lit on a rainy day. Behind the glass, hundreds of clocks, wall, pocket, mantel, fob, showed different hours, and none of them moved. On the sign, someone had written in chalk, "House of Stopped Clocks. Repairs for inner time." When she pushed the door, the bell rang a clear note of happy metal. The air smelled of wood, coffee, and orange. A white-haired man with a thin mustache and a blue coat glanced over round lenses, the way someone looks when they've been expecting you but aren't in a hurry. "You arrived at the right time," he said. "Here. Everyone does." "I don't even know what time it is," Helena answered, shifting her bag to the other arm. "I just saw the light and came in." 4:04, he said, pointing at a tall pendulum clock. "It's when regrets get loudest and the body gets most honest." Helena smiled, shy. He motioned to a little stool. "I'm Noe," he said, "a watchmaker of memories. And you are?" "Helena." "Good." Helena is the name of someone who finds her way home even when the street tries to convince her to turn back. He swept an arm across the shelves. "Each clock here belongs to a conversation that's snagged. People hang up time when a word jams. The rule is simple. You can wind one clock, and it will take you back into a conversation for exactly 7 minutes. Nothing that happened will change, but your hearing will return rinsed clean, and your mouth will return with a sentence that fits. In exchange, you pay with something you no longer use: old guilt, a promise that was never yours, pride gone musty. Does that work?" Helena didn't know what to say. Somewhere between her chest and stomach, something turned on. There were 2 conversations that scraped her like a half-peeled label. One with her daughter Lara, 3 years ago, the day the girl said, "Mom, I'm going." And Helena answered, "Going where with that head of yours?" Another with her own mother, many years before, in the kitchen, when the old woman tried to say, "I'm not that strong," and Helena, in a rush, said, "Of course you are." "May I look?" she asked. "You must," said Noe, opening the lid of a small mantel clock. Inside, instead of gears, was a tiny photograph. Helena and Lara in the apartment hallway, suitcases by the door. "Conversations weigh more in here when we refuse to let them weigh anything out there," he explained. "What's your sentence?" Helena took a slow breath. Since that fight she had collected perfect answers, always too late. None fit now. Only one, small, held steady. "I hear you. Fully." "Good," said Noe, approving as if she had repaired something with an original part. "And the question to bring back?" Helena thought of Lara's voice shaking in tiny ripples. The question came as if it had always been waiting. "What about you, am I afraid to know?" "Excellent. 7 minutes." Noe touched a key to the shaft. "When the hand reaches 4, you return. Don't cut the other person off. Don't try to win. The clock doesn't like that." Helena nodded. The world turned with the elegance of a pendulum, and suddenly she was in her hallway, the faint shampoo scent of Lara still in the air, the suitcases like 2 exclamation marks left open. The conversation had already started, as always, at the worst moment. Lara was saying, "I have to try to live my life." And Helena, frightening love with logic, was saying, "And mine?" Helena held back the impulse to fix the past. She remembered the rule: listen clean, say one sentence that fits. She leaned her back against the wall as if giving herself room to pass through, and said only, "I hear you. Fully." Lara blinked, tripping on a step that wasn't there. She was silent a second, then let out a nervous laugh that was also contained crying. "Fully?" she asked. "Fully. Helena repeated without speeches, without explaining. And what about you am I afraid to know? Lara breathed the way she used to as a child, sniffing the sheets fresh from the line. She looked at the suitcases, then back at her mother. That I won't come back the same, she said softly. That I won't fit your map anymore. That you'll look at me and only see an absence. Helena felt her chest become a room throwing open a window. So many years demanding nothing change, and love right there, asking to change together. She wanted to run, hug, promise rivers, but the clock in the shop marked 4, and she heard the invisible click that pulls you back. Before leaving, she offered one last thing, not advice, not fear. If you change, teach me the way. The hallway vanished. The whisper of suitcases turned to wind, and back in the shop, Noe was already holding a tray of coffee. Well? Helena gripped the counter's edge, her eyes wet. I think I heard my daughter for the first time. Pay with what you don't use anymore, Noe said, sliding over a bottomless little box. Helena looked in. It held nothing, and yet could hold everything. She said inside the old argument, while you're under my roof, placed the phrase, do as I say, and also the fear of being alone dressed up as care. The box drank like it had an ancient thirst. In return, the watchmaker handed her a slip of paper with 3 handwritten words. Presence, curiosity, rest. For when your ears get tired, he said. Want to try another? She did. A hanging clock with a photo of her mother blinked up high, discreet. Noe had to climb a little ladder. Conversations with mothers require your whole body, he warned. What's your sentence? Helena didn't dodge it. I can care for you without turning you into proof that I am strong. The question returned already formed. Where did I learn that love means bearing it alone? 7 minutes in a whole world. The kitchen smelled of garlic and a wet dishcloth. Her mother in a lilac apron studied her hands with a small sadness, like someone trying to read her age in the map of her skin. I'm not that strong, her mother said, and the past. Helena ran it over with, of course you are. But the Helena of now breathed and said what she had come to say. I can care for you without turning you into proof that I am strong. Her mother lifted her eyes. An old relief, childhood-shaped, filled her pupils again. Then sit, she said, smiling, foolishly beautiful. And eat with me before you fix the world. Helena sat. The clock struck 4. Coming back hurt and healed at the same time. After that, she became a regular at the House of Stopped Clocks. Not every day, the heart can handle daily maintenance, but whenever she woke with bones speaking louder than thoughts. Sometimes she chose clocks of people who were gone, sometimes of people who were still here but had turned into echoes. She carried short sentences, returned heavy things. She left with questions that made her work. What in me is asking for water that I keep calling weakness? Which part of another's freedom do I envy? How many times did I run because I was afraid I might fit? On the 4th visit, Noe pulled from a drawer a pocket watch so smooth it seemed polished by the sea. Inside was no photo, only a piece of blue cloth embroidered with flourishes. This one is for conversations with yourself, he said. Some people can't take it, think it's corny, laugh out of nerves, but it's good. What's your sentence? Helena stared at the cloth, remembering how often she demanded perfection of herself, how many sleepless nights trying to become the versions the world wanted, how many times she hid her crying so as not to alarm others. I don't have to be ready to deserve rest, she said. And the question? What about me am I willing to learn slowly? The watch took Helena to her bathroom mirror, some long ago dawn, her face washed, no makeup, pointing out her flaws to herself with the cruel patience of someone who loves you the wrong way. That conversation had always been harsh. This time she leaned against the cold tile, looked into her own eyes and spoke with a gentleness that surprised the grout. I don't have to be ready to deserve rest. The woman in the mirror nearly laughed, unaccustomed to kindness. Instead, she cried a little. The question fogged itself onto the glass. What about me am I willing to learn slowly? When the hand touched 4, Helena returned with fewer weapons. The changes started leaking out of the shop. At the hospital during handover, she stopped saying, "It's quick," when it wasn't. She began to answer slowly, to ask, "Do you want me to listen or to fix?" To say, "I don't know," without apology. Her colleague Joanna, whose laugh always sounded like a lidded pot, blurted one day, "You're different." Helena smiled. "I just started staying." Laura called on a Friday with construction noise in the background. "I'm painting the ceiling. It's crooked." Helena swallowed the urge to instruct her to cover it with plaster and said, "Send me a photo. I can come over and pass you the roller." They painted late. It turned out crooked and beautiful. There was also a night when the shop was closed, but Helena needed it. She sat on the bench across the street and opened the Notes app. She wrote as if opening a window. Sentence, "I hear you. Fully." Question, "What about you am I afraid to know?" Return, "I was just joking," used to make hurt smaller. The moon listened. Months later, on a windy Saturday, Helena brought a cake for Noé. The shop smelled like the first day of school. "Today the pendulum will stop at 12:12, he announced. "When that happens, the clocks choose you. Ready?" Helena laughed, nervous. "No," she said honestly. "But I'm going anyway." The pendulum stopped at 12:12 like someone holding their breath before diving. A small children's clock began making a sound like a bicycle far away. Inside it was a very old conversation. Helena at 8, her mother folding sheets. The little girl said, "I'm afraid to sleep." And the mother, not knowing how to say it any other way, said, "Don't be silly." The adult Helena stepped in with the careful feet of someone who doesn't want to interrupt and told the child, "Fear is a creature that needs a name and a lap. You have both." The girl touched the hem of her mother's dress, then touched Helena's hand. The bicycle sound brightened. Returning, Helena dropped into the bottom of a tin the habit of laughing at herself before others could. In exchange, she received an old saint card with no saint, just the words, "Be a home, not a display." At day's end, Noé hung up his coat. "The house of stopped clocks doesn't repair time," he said, closing the window. "It repairs how you use it. Are you using it better?" "I think so," Helena answered. "I have fewer answers and more questions that fit." "Then you're moving," he smiled. "People who walk with good questions arrive in places answers never reach." The next dawn at 4:04, the window was dark again. Helena didn't mind. She had discovered that, after a while, you carry a small toolkit inside. At home, she wrote on a sheet and pinned it to the fridge with a pineapple magnet. Sentence of the day. "I can care without erasing myself." Question of the day. Which part of another's freedom scares me? Return. Long explanations to avoid saying no. On Sunday, she took her father to eat at the street market and, instead of policing the salt, asked for a story from his youth. On Tuesday, she sat on Laura S.'s apartment floor to assemble a shelf and let her daughter lead. On Thursday, she took half an hour at the hospital to eat while looking out the window instead of reading charts. In that half hour, she cried a little. No one died because of it. Perhaps someone lived better. One night, she found an unmarked envelope at her door. Inside was a loose clock hand, polished like a tear in sunlight. Tiny letters were engraved on the metal. Presents. She slipped the hand onto a chain and wore it around her neck. Not as a medal, but as a reminder that the right time is almost always now, and almost never has trumpets. And if you ask whether the house of stopped clocks exists, Helena would answer like someone who discovered something that doesn't need convincing. There are shops, yes, but there are also kitchen corners at 4:04, and bus windows and park benches. In all of them, now and then, a shelf of clocks appears that keeps conversations. The rule is always similar. Listen clean, say one sentence that fits, return a weight that is no longer yours. The rest is the work of use. Choosing questions that open and deciding to stay while the world offers you escape. On Lara's birthday, with a living room painted wrong and beautiful, a crooked cake and good music, Helena noticed that the apartment clock had started working again. It didn't mark exact hours. It marked true ones. When the wall clock hit 4:04, no one looked up. They were too busy laughing. And for the first time in a long while, Helena felt that the conversation still missing could happen tomorrow, without rush and without heroics. She already knew the sentence, and she already knew the question. Time, like that, neither hurries nor delays. It accompanies.